So excited to have so many wonderful members of our community here joining us today. We have scholars, athletes, some really exciting, accomplished professional educators, as well as students and artists. So with that, we will get started. I will let everybody know, because we do have so many people we are celebrating this evening, following all of the awards and presentations, we will have a brief intermission to allow those who might want to go enjoy the weather if it's not pouring down rain yet, maybe do a little homework before finals. But at any rate, we will have a break, so you'll have an opportunity to leave if you so desire, and then we will resume with our meeting. And so with that, we will go straight to roll call.
All members are present.
Fabulous, thank you. Next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will please stand and join us as we recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, in between each of the presentations, Courtney Taylor is going to be taking pictures on behalf of the school district, so if you would remain standing after you shake hands in this general area, Courtney will do that. So thank you, and we will get started with our very first special presentation, the Stephen A. Backer Carmel Clay School Teacher of the Year.
Great, thank you. Tonight I have the privilege of recognizing Sarah Wolf. If Sarah could come up. Sarah was recently named our 2018 Stephen A. Backer Teacher of the Year. Sarah has been an art teacher at Carmel High School since 2000. She continues to impact the lives of thousands of students while fostering leadership both inside and outside of the classroom. Each year, she leads more than 750 students through her role as House of Representatives sponsor, helping raise millions of dollars for charities through remarkable events such as Dance Marathon, Cancer Tailgate for Life, community blood drives, and other year-round initiatives. She also dedicates her time as a sponsor to our dance team, spending countless hours teaching dance technique and inspiring the team to perform their best at all home boys and girls soccer games. Sarah will now represent Carmel Clay Schools for the Indiana Teacher of the Year. Congratulations again to our Teacher of the Year, Sarah Wolf. Congratulations. Thank you, Sarah. Next, we have Carmel Clay School Support Staff of the Year. If Mrs. Donna Quilligan could come up and join me. It's an honor to once again recognize Donna Quilligan as our 2018 Carmel Clay School Support Staff of the Year. Donna has been an instructional assistant for Carmel Elementary for 23 years. One nomination described Donna as a gracious individual who works tirelessly to ensure every student and staff member feels valued and cared for. Donna Quilligan continually and consistently goes above and beyond for students and staff at Carmel Elementary. Every year, without fail, she remembers staff birthdays with cards and treats. She knows students' names and greets them with a warm smile. She has not only worked in my classroom as an instructional assistant, but she stands out as a friendly face for every member of Carmel Elementary. Donna Quilligan puts in great effort and has the kindest heart. I can't imagine a support staff member more deserving of this than Donna. Congratulations again to Donna Quilligan for our 2018 Carmel Clay Support Staff of the Year. Congratulations. Now I have the honor to recognize our young artist. And every 6 months, we choose new young artists to display their artwork in our boardroom so you can see it throughout the 6-month period. And we're very excited. I know we have many art teachers here. If you are an art teacher, if you would please stand to be recognized. And thank you so much for our art teachers who guide our students to make this remarkable work. And also I'd like to call your attention to, in the entryway here, each month one of our art teachers will display art material out there of their students with a little mini art display. And we have stuff out there from Town Meadow Elementary School. And you can see it was a very collaborative effort. The art that is displayed out there was done by all of the students in the school. So make sure on your way out this evening you take a look at that out in our entryway. So as our young artists, if you would come up and we'll give you a certificate, and then if you would come over here and you'll have a chance to shake the board members' hands, but if you would kind of just start right here. So first we have Eli Nix, a 4th grade student at Carmel Elementary. That's okay. We have Lin Xiong, a 10th grade student at Carmel High School. Yiling Li, an 8th grade student at Carmel Middle School. Aksh Ranjan, a 3rd grade student at Cherry Tree Elementary. Leah Fredericks, a 7th grade student at Clay Middle School. Jake Benjero, a 5th grade student at Collegewood Elementary. Sydney Scazzaro, an 8th grade student at Creekside Middle School. Charlotte Horrocks, a 5th grade student at Forestdale Elementary. Aliyah Mana, a 1st grade student at Mohawk Trails. Daniela Manning, a 2nd grade student at Orchard Park. Maya Gilhuli, a 3rd grade student at Prairie Trace Elementary. Kate Latterell, a 5th grade student at Smoky Row Elementary. Sarah Nazal, a 5th grade student at Town Meadow Elementary. Maria Kingsley, a 4th grade student at West Clay Elementary. And Lexi France, a kindergarten student at Woodbrook Elementary. Congratulations to our young artists, and you can go through and shake the board members' hands. Also this evening, we would like to recognize Amy Dilk, a student at Carmel High School. She was named Indiana's Miss Basketball and Gatorade Indiana Basketball Player of the Year. Amy was not able to be with us this evening, but we did want to recognize her, so congratulations to Amy. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Chris Krakey, our Department Chair for Performing Arts, up to the podium to congratulate our winter guard, or our guard.
Thank you very much, and good evening. We are here tonight to recognize the Carmel High School A Guard. There are 3 different classifications of Guard that we sponsor here at Carmel Clay Schools. We have our World Guard, we have our A Guard, and we have our JV and Cadet Guard for our middle schools. Our A Guard had an absolutely outstanding season this year, absolutely unprecedented in the history of our group. We started this group about 6 years ago because of the demand for spots in our groups. And this year, they both won their very first competition ever. But they also finished their season undefeated. They finished first at the Indianapolis WHGE Regional, and they also won the Class A state championship here in Indiana for the IHS-CGA. So we're here to recognize 5 of our student leaders out of the 35 students that are in the group. And so tonight we are going to recognize Claire Evanson, who could not be with us tonight, Natalie Johnson, Claire Millstone, Izzy Shelton, and Alexa Van. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. The future is very, very bright in our Color Guard program. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Chard Reed to come up to honor our DECA.
I'm going to go ahead and have the top 10 winners for DECA come on up, and I'll briefly kind of explain what's going on with them as they make their way up front. But for those of you that don't know, DECA is an international business organization, has over 225,000 students in the world participate each year. And this year, Carmel DECA sent 126 students to compete at international competition, of which, with 17,000 kids dwindling down from that 225,000 who started the year, 17,000 competed at internationals. We had 48 students make the finals, which is top 20, and 33 students finish in the top 10. Tonight we want to recognize just the hard work and effort that these 33 students have put in. And as I call your name, if you can come forward to Ms. Taylor and Dr. Dudley and receive your award. So starting 9th in the world in the advertising campaign, Paul Klinger and Vikram Udayan. Ninth in the world in hotel and lodging series event, Tara Kondalu. Seventh in the world in the school-based enterprise for their work with the Carmel Cafe and Market, Audra Marchese, Gatika Goganini, and Maddie Gomer. Seventh in the world for their work with the International Business Plan, Noah Huber, Amit Kanan, and Keith Money. Sixth in the world for International Business Plan, Lorraine Lee, and Amy Tien. Fifth in the world for their work with the Finance Operations Research Event, Ben Goldberg, Joey Mendoza, and Robbie Levine. Fifth in the world for Business Services Operation Research Event, Kate Ranke and Claire Gibbon. Fourth in the world in the Personal Financial Literacy Event, Crystal Shu. Fourth in the world in the Accounting Series Event, Sarah McDaniel. And if you follow us on Twitter or anything, we have a hashtag that we use a lot, is Win Some Glass. And what that means is at the international competition, students who finish in the top 3, they win a big glass trophy. And that's kind of our goal each year. Is top 10 is our first and foremost goal. And then after that, it's the winning glass. And that's the top 3. And these groups all achieved that this year. Most ever previously was 4 glass winners, and we had 6 glass winners out of 20 events possible this year. So it was a really big deal. Third in the world, Carly Chia and Daniel Tajwar. Third in the world for Buying and Merchandising Operations Research Event, Meredith Black and Delaney Tijek. Also worth mentioning, these ladies placed 5th in the world last year, and Meredith was the first Carmel DECA member to ever make it to international competition as a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. Second in the world, Akio Fujita, Srinith Chala, and Kavan Rajendran. Second in the world for the Entrepreneurship Promotion Event. These 3 gentlemen led the campaign with the Spark Project. Some of your students may have actually participated in that at the elementary and the middle school. And they created a plan where middle school and elementary kids could develop an entrepreneurial mindset and actually create a real solution to a real problem in their schools and ask us for money like Shark Tank. And then we awarded them money to implement that. And these 3 gentlemen got second in the world: Anthony Zakola, Gauthman Manakandan, and Drake Wang. And our first world champion group in the Startup Business Plan, I don't think they're able to be here this evening, but AJ Sorkin and Dean Sofianopoulos. I think that was the first time I ever got his name right. He would have been really proud of that. And our other world champion group in the Financial Literacy Promotion Event, they worked with elementary students, middle school, and high school students in our district, as well as with the Girl Scouts to promote financial literacy in our community. Oti Obede, Cassidy Zhang, and Joanna Zhang. Sure.
Shake hands and then we'll get a picture.
Congratulations, guys.
And now I'd like to invite Mrs. Brittany Wiseman up to the podium to honor our Science Olympiads and also our Tech Hounds.
Thank you. If I could have the Tech Hounds team come forward, please. Yeah, just right over there. This is just a very, very, very small sampling of all of the members that are part of the Tech Hounds team. Tech Hounds has been here for over 20 years, and they're our robotics team, and they're there nights and weekends, and well, basically anytime the doors are open, Tech Hounds is there working. So we just want to congratulate Tech Hounds. They are state champions for the Indiana First Robotics. They went on to compete at World Championships against 400 teams from around the globe. They won their division and they placed 5th overall, which is truly amazing. And I strongly encourage all of you with devices to at some point go to techhounds.com and look under media. You can see their amazing videos and photos of all of their competitions. I know they definitely wanted to bring some robots in, but there was not enough room for that. So please check that out. So first we have Zach Bonowit, who's the sponsor and coach of the Tech Hounds team. And then the students representing, we have Caleb Smith, Laura Doby, Megan Singer. I don't think Austin Hartman could be here. And then we have Allison Earnhardt. Congratulations on your wonderful wins this season. And I also have the pleasure to recognize our Science Olympiad team. So if some of those members, as well as their sponsor, Ms. Cynthia Henry, if they could come up, please. You can see they're very intelligent. They stood in the right spot. So Science Olympiad, these just a few of their members are here tonight, and they actually just got back from Fort Collins, Colorado. So they must be very, very tired. But this season, they earned first place at the Indiana State Tournament, and the team competed in 23 tournament events and 4 trial events, earning the lowest score, which is a really good thing, for Carmel. And just to put it in perspective, CHS earned a score of 77, and the second place team earned a score of 144. And as I said, they just got back from the national tournament in Fort Collins, Colorado, where they placed 3rd in anatomy and physiology, and then 7th in Wi-Fi lab and Codebusters, and they placed 24th overall, which is extremely impressive. So congratulations. We have Cynthia Henry, the sponsor, is here tonight, as well as several of her students. We have Aditya Belakar, Jessica Mo, Sadvik Kumar, and Joe Pavola. Congratulations.
Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Streisel, our sponsor of the highlight, and he is going to honor some of our students. Mr. Jim?
Thank you for inviting us here tonight. My name is Jim Streisel, and I am the advisor for the Highlight News magazine. It's my privilege to recognize the accomplishments of this year's team. As many times as I've stood up here to recognize the accomplishments of the Highlight, just 3 times in my 23 years of teaching at Carmel High School has the Highlight staff won every single state and national competition it entered. This is that 3rd time. That means this year the Highlight earned its 9th consecutive Indiana High School Press Association Hoosier Star, not 1 but 2 National Scholastic Press Association Pacemakers, often called the Pulitzer Prize of Scholastic Journalism, 1 for print, its 6th consecutive, and 1 for online, its 2nd consecutive, and a Columbia Scholastic Press Association Gold Crown Award. That's the staff's 5th in the past 6 years. This year's Highlight staff worked hard to carry on the traditions of exceptional journalism set by previous year's members, and it is my honor to recognize this year's leadership team, many of whom are here tonight, who are here to accept the board's recognition on behalf of the 78-member Highlight News staff. Starting with managing editors Aditya Balamkar, and Jessica Mo. I want to get them both because they're also exceptionally good at science, too. Kalia Miao. Nisa Chow and Alan Zhang could not be here tonight, nor could our Acumen Editor-in-Chief, Alina Hussein, but here tonight is Highlight Editor-in-Chief, Manahil Nadeem. Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
And now I'd like to introduce Mr. Dominic James, our advisor for WHGE Radio.
Thank you. Good evening. It's been an absolute pleasure working with the radio students at WHGE. They have produced work that's truly excellent week in, week out, and it's really the icing on the cake to have entered a state competition and the national competition, and for them to have done so well. In the national competition, we were shortlisted for 25 different categories, and we had winners in 10 of them, which is truly remarkable. The sports department we'll start off with, very, very strong. They're led by Ben McDonald, and he won the best play-by-play commentator for baseball, and also part of the best sports broadcast in Indiana. Very well done, Ben. Griffin Gonzalez, he's our media manager, social media and web manager. He won the best play-by-play commentary for both football and also basketball, as well as being part of the best sports broadcast in Indiana. Well done, Griffin. These guys are both seniors. We're lucky to keep Sam Wexler. He's a sophomore. He's a junior, taking over as sports director next year, and he won the best play-by-play for a soccer commentary. Well done, Sam. Another live show, the best talk show in the country was awarded to 3 girls for everything but the kitchen sink. First of all, Anna Fagin. Caitlin Varanka. And McKenna McLeod, who was also came a runner-up as the best on-air personality in the state. Well done, McKenna. So these are all live shows, but a lot of the work we do is pre-produced as podcasts and so on. We had a number of national winners there. First of all, Uma Kokolakota, she won the best documentary in the country. Well done. Jayshna, who has been interviewing Dr. Dudley and Mr. McMichael recently, she won the best public affairs show. Well done. Combining talents in both live work and also pre-produced work is a sophomore, and she entered 2 categories which are probably have the most entries: news bulletins and promos for radio stations, and Julia Sweet won both of them. Well done. And finally, our podcast master in the station. His work is truly remarkable. Please log on to WHGE.com and listen to Melomania. Patrick Simpson's work on music specialty shows is remarkable. Well done, Patrick. First in the nation. Thanks, Jim.
Now I'd like to introduce Mrs. Terry Ramos, our department chair for the communications department, to honor our Pinnacle student.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here this evening. I just want to tell you about 3 students in our yearbook program who this year competed at the Journalism Education Association and National Scholastic Press Association convention that was held in San Francisco in April. They compete on site against all of the other students that are there from across the nation in different divisions, and these 3 young ladies placed in those events. We first have Elise Hogarth. Elise earned a superior ranking in the academics copy and captions competition. This ranking is the highest possible ranking in the competition and is evidence of a professional level writing ability. Colleen Harless Colleen earned an excellent ranking in a sports writing copy and captions competition, one of the largest contest categories in the entire convention. And Abby Carmichael, Abby earned an excellent ranking in the infographics contest, which assessed her ability to convey verbal information effectively in a visual manner. Again, like a sporting competition, these students were able to exhibit their craft at the moment on premises, so it was a really exciting event, and we congratulate you on your fine work. Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite Mrs. Andrea Yoakum, our World Language Department Chair, to honor one of our teachers in the World Language Department.
Hi, everyone. It is my great honor tonight to present an award to Mrs. Laura King. Those of you may know her as Frau King. So from this point on, I'm going to say Frau King. So Laura has won the IFLTA German Secondary Teacher of the Year, so the IFLTA Indiana Foreign Language Teachers Association. This award is a long time coming. I think if it's something I could give every year, Laura would win this award every year. I have had the pleasure of knowing Laura for the past 10 years. When Laura first interviewed at Carmel High School, I was on the committee that was interviewing her, and I remember she left the interview, and I said to the department chair at the time, "It's like, we have to hire this woman. We have to hire her." And it was one of the best decisions I think we ever made as a department. So Laura's not only an exceptional German teacher, she's also the sponsor of the German Club, and they go on all kinds of field trips. They're always doing really cool activities. She also works with the Gap Exchange, which is a German exchange where German students come to the U.S. and spend 3 weeks here at Carmel High School, and then she and the other German teacher take students to Germany every other year. So I read once a quote that there are people who make the world a better place just by being in it, and Laura, you are one of those people. Her generous spirit, she inspires others. She's always sharing ideas. It's just unbelievable. I told her last week that she's the kind of teacher that makes me want to be a better teacher and makes me want to be a better leader. We are so honored tonight to give Laura this award and wish her congratulations and best of luck and best wishes. At this time, we will pause momentarily should anybody desire to leave. I know people have been leaving along, so if you want to take a couple minutes to yourselves, that'll be super. We'll resume in about 2 minutes. Okay, we'll resume our meeting at this time, and we are going straight into public participation. As many of you know, during our board workshops, we do not have public participation, but we do have an opportunity for members of the community to make comments to the board at our regular business sessions, and so that is this evening. We have a number of names that we'll be calling. When we do call your name, if you would please approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record. You will have 2 minutes to share your thoughts. There are some lights on the top of the podium to just give you a visual of how much time you have left. The yellow will go on. Green will light when you start. Yellow will go on when you have 30 seconds, and then the red will illuminate with an audible buzz when your time has expired. And at that time, we hope you wrap up your comments so somebody else has an opportunity to share their thoughts. So at this time, we will go with our first individual. We have Sue Mackay.
Hello, my name is Sue Mackay, and I live at 317 2nd Avenue Northeast. My husband Tom and I have lived in Carmel for 30 years. We currently do not have children in Carmel schools, but we do pay taxes and we do vote. I'm a past PTO president and a graduate of the Carmel Schools Expedition Program. I love Carmel schools, and I'm grateful for everything its leaders have done to keep the quality of education high and our taxes low. Over the many years of my involvement with Carmel schools, I have witnessed several redistrictings and have seen the angst that change causes. But all of the past and future redistrictings could have a lesser negative effect if the schools were spread out geographically across the city. The areas of growth in our city changes over time. The predictions of the demographers changes as well. For the sake of all of our students, not just today, but 30 years from now, doesn't it make sense to have a geographic spread of schools across the district rather than schools clustered around the far edges of our city? Several years ago, Tom Murphy, Senior Resident Fellow with the Urban Land Institute, spoke to a joint meeting of the Hamilton County Chambers of Commerce's. In his presentation, he talked about the change in demand of housing types across the United States. People of all ages are desiring smaller dwelling units in walkable areas. While the Midwest often experiences cultural shifts at a later date than what the coasts do, this change in housing preference is coming nevertheless. You can see it in the redevelopment in the central part of Carmel. Please do not undermine the momentum and investment the City of Carmel and the business community has put in the central part of Carmel. Please keep Carmel Elementary open. Thank you.
Next, we have Darcy Wylie.
I'm Darcy Wylie at 255 3rd Avenue Northeast. Tonight, I'm honored to represent hundreds of parents and residents of Carmel who have communicated loud and clear that keeping Carmel Elementary at the heart of Carmel is vital for both the city and the district. Over the past 6 weeks, our fellow citizens have signed petitions and flooded the school board's inboxes with letters, questions, comments, all in support of keeping our school in place. This support goes beyond those with children who would be directly affected by this decision. Neighbors, business owners, and developers all agree that protecting Carmel Elementary aligns with the city's vision for a family-friendly, generationally diverse community with increasing walkability, bikeability, and connectivity. This vision impacts citizens' physical well-being, emotional well-being, in addition to affecting property values. Data shows that Gen Xers, young Gen Xers, and millennials in particular are seeking out these tight-knit communities and localized amenities and choosing a place to raise their families. This growing potential in our community, as well as changes in enrollment when students graduate and their parents become empty nesters, could affect numbers in ways that the administration or the demographers may not be anticipating. To be ready for long-term increases and decreases in various areas of the district, we must maintain a strong center which allows for future flexibility in districting while keeping the district's transportation times and costs at a minimum. It makes sense to keep Carmel Elementary School in its place, in its central location near Carmel High School, Carmel Middle School, the Carmel Library, and the Carmel Arts and Design District. Whether we decide to renovate the current building or rebuild on site, we are confident that the school that bears the city's name should remain in place in the heart of our city.
Laura Moore. Laura Moore.
Good evening. My name is Laura Moore. I live at 1527 Orchard Park Drive North, Indianapolis, Indiana. Tonight I am speaking to the school board, interim superintendents, and the public on behalf of Orchard Park Elementary United, a group of concerned Carmel Clay School parents and community members. We have listened to each presentation, asked questions, and provided preliminary feedback. We have also taken considerable time to understand the community members' questions, concerns, and perspectives as they relate to the elementary school facilities discussion. On May 20th, we sent each of you 600 petition signatures supporting the renovation of Orchard Park, over 100 specific stakeholder comments about the issue, and the official position statement of Orchard Park Elementary United, a 9-page document detailing why you will find that renovating Orchard Park Elementary is the best interest of the Carmel Clay School District, the Carmel community, and the students and families it serves for the following 4 reasons. Number 1, renovating is cost effective. Renovations of this size in comparable schools total nearly $9 million, only 50% of the cost to building new. OPE is a valuable, centralized, and highly accessible location that has been the hub of physical activity in the home place community for over 60 years. And number 3, there is a strong community support. 600 people have signed the petition to renovate, and over 400 people have joined the Facebook group as followers. And finally, number 4, the enrollment and forecast data do not support the need for this potential school closure. The projected 2018 enrollment difference from the demographic study versus the actual enrollment was roughly 7.2%. The margin of error was near the size of a Carmel Clay Elementary School. In the statement, we provided supporting documentation that elaborates on each of these points, demonstrating that renovating Orchard Park Elementary is an obvious decision that meets the needs and the interests of the current and future stakeholders throughout the Carmel Clay District. We look forward to your response to our position statement, signatures, and stakeholder comments so we can share with our 600 supporters your input. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you. Thank you from Orchard Park Elementary United.
Christopher Moore.
My name is Christopher Moore, and I live at 1527 Orchard Park Drive North. Mr. McMichael, at the Town Hall meeting at Orchard Park Elementary, you asked an audience member to define community for you. I will define it for you and the board. Last Carmel Clay School Board meeting, I spoke about renovating Orchard Park Elementary and Carmel Elementary, and just about everyone in the jam-packed room stood up silently in support of renovating these outstanding schools as documented by the consistent A rating by the Indiana Department of Education. That is the definition of community. As a parent of 4 children who go to Orchard Park Elementary, I want all of my children to continue to receive the quality education at Orchard Park Elementary. I worked hard all through college at Ball State University and then in my master's program at Indiana University so that when I had kids, they could attend successful schools. My wife and I specifically bought the house in Orchard Park so they could go to this highly successful and diverse elementary school. Orchard Park Elementary also has Title I services that help many students become successful learners. Several of my children have received Title I support, and they have done well on standardized tests such as iRead. My daughter Annabelle won first place in the science fair in 3rd grade, and she was taught by an outstanding teacher, Mrs. Moyer. Mrs. Fellige, who still teaches in CCS, taught many of my children and helped them become students who really love learning. Lindsay Schorner has worked well in helping my daughter Caroline read well above a kindergarten level. Mr. Bushing pushes my kids to be active and healthy, and I appreciate that. The Kindy 500th edition at Orchard Park Elementary is simply amazing, with all the kindergartners flying around on the outdoor blacktop on their big wheels. Orchard Park Elementary is vital to Carmel Clay Schools and should be renovated. Renovate Orchard Park and Carmel Elementary. It is the right choice to make.
Tom Lang.
My name is Tom Lang. I live at 5048 St. Charles Place, Kingswood Subdivision in Carmel. I'm a grandparent. I don't have any kids in the Carmel Clay Schools, with one exception. I have a grandson who attends Forestdale. The topic that I wanted to speak to you with is an article that my wife wrote and sent to the Current and Carmel. And in effect, it says, "What is the price of a life?" And I'm here tonight to talk about school safety. The one thing that I don't know, because I've never attended a board meeting before, is what the status is of a plan to harden our schools. And so what I'd like to do is just cover some points that my wife and I feel are very important, with the emphasis on getting it done. Be proactive. I don't want to see what happened in Santa Fe, Texas last week happen here in Carmel. With that in mind, I would like the board to consider taking a proactive approach to security in our schools. And this would involve having local control and implementation of a comprehensive security plan. The advantage is that we wouldn't have any state or federal input into that. We just go ahead and get it done within the guidelines that we have to live with. A full security threat assessment for high school, middle school, and elementary schools. A perimeter surveillance system with all doors alarmed. Controlled access, basically through one entryway. A portal metal detector system, not only for the high schools, but the middle schools and the elementaries. And what I was thinking about is I can go to the elementary school to pick up my grandson, and they have to ring me in. But what's to prevent a shooter with a coat and gun under it do the same thing I do, walk in and open fire? Well, if we had a portable metal detector, we could prevent that. Lastly, armed security in buildings at all times. Determine an implementation cost, and if funds are needed, to figure out a way of going about getting it done. Finally, a public-private partnership is a term that I've heard Mayor Brainerd use, and this is in effect where the school board could interact with the community for a positive outcome. We would have the opportunity to be one of the first in the state, and this would be a win for Carmel Clay Schools by providing a safe school environment, a win for the city to highlight a place where people could work and live in safety.
Mr. Lang, could you please wrap up your thoughts?
And my final statement is, for those of you who are real estate agents out there, I'm sure as a result of this that the price of your home would go up. Thank you.
Jatla Sridhar.
Hello, My name is Sridhar Jela. I live at 1880 Bloor Heath in Carmel, and I'd like to take this opportunity to speak specifically about the Carmel Clay Elementary Parent Survey, which was sent out recently. And specifically, there was a question there that spoke about whether we support diversity in ability, culture, ethnicity, and gender. And I feel that that is a very highly misleading question that is biased and designed to get a specific answer in mind to support the cluster grouping, which has already been rejected and has created, in essence, a black eye for the Carmel Clay school system already up to this point. I feel that question and the survey in its entirety is really a thinly veiled attempt to manufacture support for something that has not been supported, as evidenced by the many, many families that have been here at the previous meetings and mentioned those same exact things. Specifically, my wife and I moved from Westfield to Carmel for the school system, and we have a student in the Gifted and Talented program, and it has been a wonderful experience. And I feel that we have spoken to the teachers also, and they do not support this program. They are frankly afraid to say anything about the program because there could be repercussions for them, and they feel the need to toe the company line and say that they're going to go along with it when they clearly do not. And they have told us that, and other parents have told that as well. In essence, I feel this is trying to put a shine on a turd, but the cluster group is still a turd. And there's specific quotes even from Krista Smith, director of Ball State's Center for Graduate Studies and Talent Development, who stated that, speaking about Carmel's system of cluster proposal, they definitely should be offering a lot more services than cluster grouping. And Marcia Gentry, the pioneer of cluster grouping, said this is not designed for a district of this size. Thank you.
Joseph Liu. Joseph Liu.
Hi, my name is Joseph Liu. I'm at 13688 Mary Lou Drive in Longridge Estates in Carmel. I'm here to also talk about the recent Carmel Clay survey that was sent to elementary school parents, and also objecting to the apparent bias, the apparent question where diversity is going to be set against setting up a high ability and gifted program. You saw all the kids coming in that we all honored for the first 45 minutes, 50 minutes here. How many of those kids came from our gifted program? And how many of these kids were fed through the elementary school system? And we're honoring not only the jocks, we're honoring the scientists, we're honoring the artists, we're honoring the future business people. We have diversity in this town. And so when I had the opportunity 2 years ago to move to Indianapolis to further my career, one of the things I looked at was that my wife looked at was the school systems, and Carmel Clay rose to the top of the lists. Many of them, much of it, in fact, due to the high ability programs. I have 3 children: a current 5th grader, a 2nd grader, and a 1st grader. 2 of them who are in that program. So, seeing how this total school cluster grouping is this attempt to dismantle something that it has already proven to have, just even tonight, seeing all these children being honored. And I don't understand how we're going to try to dismantle what is a system that is working well. It might be expensive to have this high ability program, but let's keep it, or if you're going to ask a survey about our opinions, let's not hide the problem, let's not hide the question in diversity versus high ability, and let's ask the question directly, and you'll get an answer from all of us, that we should keep our high ability and gifted program and not bring in this total school clustering. Thanks.
Jennifer Zavion? Jennifer?
My name is Jennifer Zavoyan, 5169 Oldfield Court, Carmel 46033. Over these past months, Carmel Clay Schools has tried to quietly eliminate the challenge program that serves our high ability and gifted children. But after a negative response from the community, Carmel Clay Schools recently sent out a survey to supposedly find out what parents want for their elementary students, specifically those identified as high ability. This survey, however, was worded in such a way as to be leading parents to provide answers that would appear to support total school cluster grouping and the elimination of high ability programming. One item was as follows, quote, "Classrooms are diverse based on factors such as gender, culture, ethnicity, achievement, and ability." Statements like these lead parents to either provide responses that can be used to support eliminating high-ability classrooms or else misrepresent themselves as culturally and racially intolerant. Few questions pertained to the primary concern that parents have for high-ability students, academics. Carmel Clay Schools continues to push the message that high-ability students do not have adequate social interaction, yet there is no evidence to suggest that our high-ability students are in any way socially deficient. They are in clubs, they participate in sports, are active in scouting, go to camps, belong to religious organizations, and have ample opportunities to socialize. In March, we even heard from a high school student who went through an even more selective version of the Challenge program and spoke to how this program benefited her academically and socially. What high-ability students need most from school is academics, and we parents have seen firsthand that the academic potential of high-ability students is not met in general education classrooms. The Indianapolis Star, in its interview with Marcia Gentry, the key supporter of total school cluster grouping, reported that, quote, "When gifted students are separated from regular classrooms, teachers have more time to attend individual needs, and this is what we want for our high-ability students. We want their academic potential met, and according to experts in gifted and talented education, this is best achieved in classrooms specifically designed for high-ability and gifted students."
Carla Walsworth. Carla.
Hi, I'm Carla Walsworth, and I live in the Guilford Park neighborhood. We moved to Carmel 4 years ago, in part because of the great schools. Oops. Oh, I get an extra. Well, I'll thank you for telling me about DECA, because now I want to join. Okay, so we moved to Carmel 4 years ago, in part because of the great schools, and it was the right decision for us. We've continued to be impressed with everything that Carmel has to offer. My kids were little, though, and I don't know that I knew the right questions to ask. If I had known then what I know now, I would have asked about recess. My oldest was just first grade. You see, I'm here tonight because partially you're making my job harder. While I work outside the home as a finance manager, I have been involved in PTO and Taste of Carmel Committee for over 4 years. I'm an advocate for these schools in the greatest possible way. So when you have data supporting more recess, and you have a thought exchange from your constituents also supporting more recess, and you have Zionsville schools, which I've just heard a rumor that they have the same length of day and also more recess in the elementary level, and then you're choosing not to act on it this year, I think you're making my job and many of our jobs as advocates very, very difficult. My fifth grader, I wish she was here with me tonight, but she wrote a persuasive paper for her fifth grade class, and she chose to advocate for more recess, and I'd be happy to get a copy to all of you if you would like it. This was under no pressure from me. She came up with this on her own and advocated her position to her class and then had to speak about it. I think surely if an 11-year-old can do this, that our very well-educated administration and school board can certainly find time in the next 3 months to talk about this issue and advocate for change this next school year, 2018-2019. I don't think, you have a large student base of 16,000 students. I don't think they can wait 2 more years for a decision on this. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, we do appreciate everybody taking the opportunity to share their comments with us. And with that, we are going to move along to our next portion of our meeting, which is consent. May I get a motion on the table to approve consent?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the Carmel Clay Public Library Board appointment. To that, we turn to Mr. McMichael.
Okay, let me catch up.
Okay. It's long. There's a lot of consent.
Thank you. This evening, we'd like to recommend that the board appoint Ms. Stephanie Furman to complete the partial term of the vacant position at the on the Carmel Library Board. This term will expire on June the 30th, 2020. As a matter of some background information, the school board has 3 appointees to the Carmel Public Library. Due to the recent passing of Dr. Bill Wybinga, it is necessary to fill the remainder of his term. Mr. Bob Swanee, Director of the Carmel Public Library, is recommending the appointment of Ms. Furman to complete the term. So we would support that recommendation.
Thank you, Roger. We have a motion may I get a motion on the table to approve Ms. Stephanie Furman to complete the partial term of the vacant position at the Carmel Clay Public Library Board?
So moved.
Thank you, Lynn. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Katie. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we move into discussion. First on the discussion is the miscellaneous materials adoption. To that, we turn to Dr. Dudley.
Yes, thank you. This evening, I bring to you several different courses that have either changed or are new courses for materials adoption that are outside of our regular 6-year schedule for adoption. For example, our AP psychology class changed from a 1-semester class to a year-long class, and so we needed additional materials for that change in the course. We have some new courses such as ethnic studies and African studies that we are recommending materials for. And we had teachers, administrators, and parents that reviewed materials for the miscellaneous materials for the different smaller committees to recommend the materials that are on the spreadsheet.
Thank you, Dr. Dudley. Any questions for Dr. Dudley at this time? Okay. Yes, please.
I just want to say that I love it when I see all the new classes that we're offering and the fact that our students have a chance to take hospitality management and ethnic studies and educational professions. I think that is such a blessing that our students have to be able to take all these different diverse topics. So thank you to you and your team.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you. Then we will plan on taking action at the June business meeting?
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Dr. Dudley with secondary science materials adoption.
And this evening, I also bring to you from our Science Materials Adoption Committee for the secondary schools a list of materials for our middle school science courses as well as our high school science courses. The standards for science changed significantly, and we highlighted that in a previous board workshop earlier this year to share those changes in the standards. And the committee analyzed materials, looked at program evaluation recommendations, best practices, student achievement data, as well as curriculum requirements to recommend the materials that are on the spreadsheet. And I did also want to mention that for our elementary science, we are going to hold on adopting any new materials. We have kit-based science that's very experience-based in the elementary school, and so we'll continue to use those materials for next year as we work on that professional development as well. So we'll look to be bringing possibly new materials for next year for elementary, but this year's just our middle school and high school courses.
Thank you, Dr. Dudley. Questions for Dr. Dudley or comments? Okay, well then we'll plan on bringing this back at the June meeting.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll follow up then. And next on the agenda, we have Mr. McMichael with elementary facilities discussions.
Okay, first I'd like to thank all the people all the parents and so forth, and community members that did attend the 5 meetings that we had. Most of them aren't here this evening, but I know people have other things to do and they're busy. It is not because they're not interested. This community cares very much about their schools, and I think we should all appreciate that, regardless of the outcome of the recommendations. The format this evening that I'd like to go through would be I will make my recommendations. I would like to then give rationale for the recommendations, make some comments regarding the results of these recommendations. I'll show a schedule, I'll show some maps, and then I'll open it up for questions for the board. First, the recommendations. My first recommendation, I really have 3. The first recommendation is I'm recommending that we construct a new Carmel Elementary School on the current site. The second recommendation is to construct a new Orchard Park at Clay Center Road. Now, I'm using the term Orchard Park. I'm not intending to name the school. We have a whole process for that, but just for the board's clarification. As I said, alluded to, I conducted 5 public meetings, one at Orchard Park, inviting all of Orchard Park, one at Carmel Elementary, inviting Carmel Elementary, and then one at each of the 3 middle schools. For the 3 middle schools, I invited all parents, K-12, as well as all staff. The meetings were not attended as much as I would have hoped. We had about almost 300 people in total at the meetings, but many of those were duplicate count because they had attended other meetings. By my estimate, I think we had about maybe 150 different people. Between 40 and 50 of those were staff members. I should emphasize that our teachers and staff care very much about not only about our schools, but what these recommendations impact. So, first, with regard to Carmel Elementary and the rationale, I had mentioned at the meetings and shared with the board that to renovate Carmel Elementary, Ron Farron, our Director of Facilities, who I should point out is also a licensed architect and has about 30 years of experience in the school business. So he and I have, and based on our experience together, we've estimated that it would take 80 to 90% the cost of a new facility to renovate Carmel. A significant portion of that would be to add an addition to it, and really a rather sizable addition given the size of the school, because if we were to renovate it, we would want it to be size-wise equivalent to most of our other schools. I had mentioned before that has significant program implications and in terms of staffing and so forth. And of course, the program and the staff continue year after year. So if we're in a smaller school where we're not as able to be as efficient, that has cost implications. But even more than the cost, I don't want to focus on the money this evening as much as other things, such as starting with our educational program. So another issue is with renovating that building is we would basically have to reconfigure the inside because the core of the building is not large enough. The media center is not large enough. The office area is not large. And so it's not a matter of just adding classrooms. The support areas necessary would also need to be expanded. Also, the roof is an issue because the mechanical system is an issue, and and because of the type of system that we would want to put in there, we would need more ceiling height as compared to the system that's in there now. So that gets very costly. Then the electrical system would need to be upgraded, and of course we would upgrade all the finishes very heavily, and so basically everything on the inside would be new. I should comment that I've received lots of comments, and I appreciate those, and including information about how much it costs to renovate a school, and there's some comparisons of other school districts and as compared to what we're talking about. And so when you talk about renovation, it depends what you're doing, and it also depends on the building. We have some buildings that, and I should emphasize, by the way, that we're not in a situation where we're setting a standard to where we would choose to build a new building rather than renovate. If you look over the last 25 years, we've renovated lots of our schools, Forest Dale, 2 of our middle schools, the high school, and so forth. So, but it really depends so much on the specific building and the level of renovation. When I talk about renovation, I'm talking about equivalent to what we've done in other schools, not compared to other school districts. So, a significant consideration that I gave in making this recommendation relative to new versus renovation has to do with the staff and the children in a renovation having to undergo a renovation. Now, again, oftentimes there's really not a reasonable choice. I think we have choices here. But that's a very difficult process to go through. It takes a long time, can take a couple of years, maybe 3 years, depending on the project. And with a building full of students and staff, if you just imagine that, it's very difficult to do that, and we do it. We did it at the high school for years, but to have a building under renovation for a long period of time while it's occupied, because you certainly can't do that during the summer or just during the summer, just makes it very difficult. So again, when there's a choice, I believe that renovating the building and whatever less money that would be is not worth putting students through that and staff through that process, because again, a building is going to last a long time. So when you spread that over, the life of a building, it's really, I don't believe that the focus should be just on the money part of it. Then I would say the similar comments with regard to Orchard Park. Orchard Park is larger, and so it likely wouldn't have the amount of addition. Both buildings would end up with additions because in a renovation you're not as efficient with space. So that if you have a room that you're going to use for a computer lab and it has 1,500 square feet, if you were building new and you were going to build 1,000 square feet, well, you wouldn't demolish the 1,500 to bring it down. So you end up with some excess space. But both buildings have similar circumstances. Orchard Park classrooms are smaller, for example, than our other buildings. Both buildings really have the design is such that the coat closets and so forth are in the rooms, thus taking up, not square footage, because we don't count the cabinetry as a part of the floor square footage, but just access in terms of the wall, and when you can't put things on the wall if it's a coat closet. And it also, neither of these buildings have the kind of common spaces that we have now for group instruction and so forth. So I said there's really 3 recommendations. The third one is with regard to the current Orchard Park. I think it's really important that the school district participate in doing everything that we can to provide benefits, continue to provide benefits for the public at that site, which means I certainly wouldn't recommend disposing of the site or anything like that. Because there are other benefits, as significant as a school is to a community, there are other benefits. Orchard Park, for example, in that home place neighborhood has a fire station just down the street on 106 and College. That's a benefit to that community. There are other public benefits that could be available. Not that the school would necessarily provide them, but we start with the school owns the property on behalf of the community, and so it would start there at least. There are some examples for where schools provide adult education. So Orchard Park has about 31 languages spoken in that area, and so there might be a benefit to that community relative to adult classes. There may be possibilities for affordable child care. All right. And I'm talking about like preschool child care. All right. Because, you know, we know the students when they get into school, but obviously they were preschool before that. And we all know the challenges associated with child care and particularly affordable child care. And then there may be opportunities with the Carmel Dads Club or the Parks and Recreation. I think those are all, and I'm sure others, areas that we should explore as a school district to determine, to do our best at least to continue to have that site be an asset to that community. And my hope would be that it would, that we'd continue to provide excellent school for that community, but also benefits beyond that. So some of the results of these recommendations. Number one, no student will be moved for at least 3 years. So what that means is from the upcoming school year 2018-19, grades 2 through 5th graders are not affected in the sense that now the families will be, depending if they have other children, and or even if they don't really. But as far as when we talk about the students that are currently in school, we're really talking about incoming kindergarten kids, which aren't there yet, and then 1st grade. 2nd through 5th would be either through or as our past practice has been, if they were in the 5th grade, depending on, well, in this case it wouldn't apply, but we don't require 5th graders to move, you know, if that's their last year in school. As far as the schedule then, this is just an outline, but I would anticipate that we could actually start construction, really site work, in August of 2019. So this is May of 2018, which is just to say that by the time we actually get to where somebody could see we're doing something, it'll take a better part of it, over a year. We have to hire professionals. They have lots of work to do. The school district has lots of work to do in terms of what we call educational specifications. So we have to define what it is we would like in the new building to the architects and the other professionals, and then they translate that into drawings. We go back and forth until we think we've got a design that we would like, and of course we get a lot of help with that. Then by 2020, about probably February, and I'm making an assumption, by the way, that this would be a kind of a traditional process. There are different means of construction, but this schedule would be a traditional means, if you will. So by February of 2020, construction on the building itself would begin, and then by June, or end of June of 2021, the building would be ready to move into, so, or both of them. And so it would be three full school years from now. So I want to show you some slides here. This is our this is our boundary map, and many of you have seen this before. What I did was I drew a line. We've talked a lot about Meridian, and because that's a main artery north and south as well as Keystone. But the geographical middle is about where College Avenue's at, and that's what the black line is. And I did that and then highlighted where the schools are at, just so that you could, which way do I point this? All right. Give me working here. It's not the first slide. Can I do it up here? Can I do it here at the computer? Yep. Where? I want to get back to the other slide. Okay. So this is where the current schools are at, and the red star is the Clay Center Road. And I just wanted to provide this as a visual. Many of you have heard me say this before, but we have we have 4 schools on the west side, and we have 7 schools on the east. For me, at least, I thought the dividing line and emphasizing the schools created a visual that I could just see where the schools are located geographically, and you can see that obviously we have 4 on the one side and 7 on the other. This is the same visual, except I've highlighted now the Clay Center property and took off current Orchard Park. Yes, and so just visually, that Clay Center on the west side does provide more balance in terms of where the schools are located just within the district. Now again, usually we can't move schools around. The community gets, a growing community like Carmel's, people move into the community. The last 25 years, we've not moved buildings around with the exception of College Wood. We did something similar there when we built a new College Wood out on Shelburne Road. The original College Wood was on the same property as Carmel Middle School. But we've certainly added schools. Once they're added, generally if as people move into the community, you have to move the people because you can't, and we call that redistricting. Most of you are familiar with that. But you can't move the building. In the case of Orchard Park, I believe that is a viable alternative. It provides really a better site. There's 35 acres at that location. The current Orchard Park's on 12 acres. Most of our schools are on at least 20. And so the 12, now the school's been there for a long time. So it's obviously, it's not that we can't have school there. But if we're starting over or spending millions of dollars to bring it up like new, certainly we would prefer to have more acreage than what's there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is the same map, and the numbers represent groups of students. And some of these numbers you've seen, maybe all of them, if you've been to the presentations you've seen before. But I wanted to include this. First, I want to address Carmel Elementary. So the blue is Carmel Elementary. Currently, 216 students are west and north of Meridian. But there's also 200 students here from Cary Road west, and they go to Cherry Tree. So Cherry Tree is here, and so we're busing students from past the shopping center back to Cherry Tree, because not everybody can go to the closest school. And so that's where we would start, is trying to get, that would seem to make sense, but when you do that, the reason these students can't go to Smoky Row, because not everybody can fit in Smoky Row. So they end up at Carmel Elementary, and when they do, then these students can't go to Carmel Elementary, so they get in Cherry Tree. And likewise, this sliver here between Carmel Elementary and Keystone, those students are part of Mohawk Trails. There's about 60 students here. This is actually should be up here, the 60. And then in this area, this is Orchard Park. I would tell you that in the meetings that I had, in the comments that I heard, virtually everybody that identified themselves, they were from this area of Orchard Park. Really, the area identified as the Home Place area. Home Place runs roughly from Pennsylvania over to Westfield, and then north to 111th Street. So you can see that the larger portion of Orchard Park is up here and west of Meridian. And so students in this area no doubt identify with Orchard Park some of them identify with Orchard Park as their neighborhood. But we don't really have neighborhood schools in the sense that it's not like everybody walks to school, because a school with 700 kids, not everybody can live next door to the school. And in fact, at Orchard Park, about 70 students live within a mile. So that's 70 out of 700. So about, well, 300 of the students, almost half of the population is north of 111th Street. And I use 111th Street because that's the boundary for the home place area. So if the school's here, and in no way would I attempt to do redistricting this evening, but I think it's worthwhile to give some idea where the students are at, and at least in a group, in an area, where their closest school might be. So if we have a school here, then there's about 90 students that live right there. So they could be here, they could be there, they could be there. Students here, the closest school would be here. As you go farther east, then they start to get closer to Carmel Elementary or even Mohawk, possibly Woodbrook. Orchard Park. So if you're up here and going down here to Orchard Park, some of our longest bus rides for elementary is Orchard Park. These students out in here and up here, about 45 minutes. That's about the extent of our bus rides. And you can see why, because of the distance. So this area, of course, I heard a lot about. We have 3 title schools, and Orchard Park is one, Forestdale, and Carmel Elementary. So from a programmatic standpoint, and somebody mentioned it earlier this evening, when I did ask to define what's the community and so forth, I really didn't hear the building. What I heard was the program. The kids do excellent in the school, and in some cases, very specific to the program. So what services are in the building, or for their children, and so that's significant as it relates to our 3 title schools, because we receive additional funding, therefore we have additional services in those buildings, and so and that's very important. And so another issue that will come up will be when we eventually get to redistricting, because if you have a different school, or if you expand this school, obviously you're going to move students. And so the question is where do they move? And so again, it's not my intent to redistrict, but I think just in terms of closest school, Forestdale is a little over a mile from Orchard Park. Now, it's not necessarily over a mile for the parent, because if you live on 111th Street, and those of you that are familiar with that area, 111th Street has cul-de-sacs, and so if you come back out of the cul-de-sac and go to Westfield Boulevard, or Range Line, I'm sorry, and go to 106th Street, then you can either turn left or keep and go toward east, or you go further south and then go to Orchard Park, eventually to the west. So, but there's about 300, currently there's about 335 students that live in this area. And as I said, there's about 300 here, a couple hundred up there, and a couple hundred here. So we would intend to start with the closest school, and that just kind of makes sense. Now, I don't know that in the end that every student can go to the closest school, but then it would be the next closest. What I can tell you, though, that this recommendation, by my estimate, will result in about 1,300 students having shorter bus ride. So thus they're closer to school. That's 1,300 in the context of 7,000 elementary kids. So, that's a fairly significant number, particularly if you're on one of the bus routes that's 45 minutes. So this is just an aerial of Carmel Elementary, and all we were doing here was we just wanted to see if a building would fit on the property, this building, I think this is Cherry Tree, so it's not the building that would be there. We just wanted to take a building of the proper size, and kind of overlay it on the property. Now you can see in this example, and obviously we haven't started yet, so nothing's for sure at this point. And that obviously subject to board approval to begin with, but again, not trying to design the building or anything like that. But we had to confirm whether there's enough property to build
in one spot to build a building. And so this just shows as an example that if that's where a building went, it more or less would fit in the back. Now, I want to emphasize too, and probably there aren't parents here for this, but there are 4 baseball fields here. It's called Wodock Field, those of you that are familiar with it. Those fields were built, I believe, in the late 50s. And Wodock is a family name, and there's a lot of sentiment to that complex. And so there will be people in this community that would be very sad, at least, to feel like that complex was going away, or even if it's moved, it just has a lot of value, similar to a school if you're involved in baseball and so forth. And so we don't take that lightly, and that could come into play with the design. The problem is, I don't know how feasible it would be to start construction on the same site any place but there. So that'll be that's a discussion that we would need to have, and also what replaces it, because I'm told by Jack Berry, the president of the Dad's Club, that there are about 500 kids, second graders through fifth graders, that play baseball there. They play in the fall and the spring, and then some pups football too. So all of this is very important, and it's not just about bricks and mortar, and there's kids' name behind every one of these students that we move around, as you all know. But it's important that we keep that in the forefront of our mind. So I think that's my slides. So with that, I'll entertain some questions from the board.
I open up the floor. Who would like to begin? Mike?
I guess since I'm going first, first of all, I'd like to thank Roger and Dr. Dudley for all their efforts on this topic, from the long-range planning that started years and years ago to get us to this point, and specifically the last month of gathering community input. And it's been easy to see the processes from when it kind of first started to how it's evolved to the recommendation. And I just want to say publicly that your dedication to responding to all of our emails at all hours of the day, over all days of the week, just clearly shows how much you care for CCS and that you want what's best for our district and our community. And I know that we all want to do what's best for kids. By putting kids first, we are doing what is in the best interest of our community. As a district, we're very fortunate to have a strong tax base, supportive taxpayers, elected officials, parents, teachers, and administrators who all know that strong schools drive strong economic growth. So I just want to thank you and start out, and I have questions, but I'll let other board members, if they've got opening comments, go first.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I guess opening comments would be, we agree with Mike, and thank you. So,
good. I like that.
So with that, we will go into questions. Pam.
Yes, I just want to say this has been a rough process, trying to put together all of the information that we have accumulated, all the parent input, and I appreciate everything that you have said and all of the information that you've given to us. As Mike said, we have had a lot of questions, and you have been forthcoming with all of the answers that have been very helpful. And some of the questions I've asked a couple of times. I just want to say I'm probably lived in this community a lot longer than some of you. I've lived here since 1974. So I've seen this community grow. I taught at Orchard Park, taught there for 25 years. I also had a husband who taught at the high school. My 3 kids all went through the schools. So we've been very invested in this community and in the school system. I know what Orchard Park is like. I used to deal with Orchard Park. I loved Orchard Park. And having to make this decision is very hard. I can also say that going through a major renovation is also very hard. When Orchard Park went through our renovation, we were lucky enough that we were able to add on a whole new wing, 345. And when we did that, 345, that did not disrupt the rest of the building, because the old Orchard Park, the very old Orchard Park, used to be in 2 wings and had the major stuff in the middle. And then we added the 345 wing. We were able to move into the 345 wing, move first and second grade over into the other wing, and renovate that wing. So we were moving people around so that we could renovate. At the same time, it was very hard because there was a lot of construction, a lot of dust, a lot of places that we had to walk through to get where we were going, and it was walking through construction. So I would not recommend that for a school unless you had the opportunity off of like Carmel Elementary. If there was some way you could build a wing off the back of Carmel Elementary and then, you know, add to the rest of the school. I think most of your recommendations are very substantial, and I appreciate everything that you've said, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be looking at for the next couple of weeks till we make that decision. No, that was a statement.
Okay. Katie, do you have questions?
Yes, I do.
If you're ready. If not, we can move along.
Come back to me.
Okay. Lynn?
I agree with what Mike and Pam said. Thank you, Roger, for answering our questions and putting a lot of time and energy here in deciding the best use of the best way to renovate, or say to address our facility questions. I do have 2 questions here. So at the workshop last time, the last slide is a table about the future debt offerings and then future tax rates. So I wonder, how are your recommendations affect the timing, amount, and the tax rates? Compared?
Thank you for that question.
I want to see an update to that.
Yes, thanks for the question. I was so focused on the students and the staff that I neglected the financial part. But I want to emphasize that our current financial planning did anticipate a bond issue in 2020. The bond issue that was anticipated at that point was about $37 million in round numbers. So these 2 projects combined are between 55 to 60 million without getting it estimated, but just knowing about what we think it would take. On today's money, it would be in that range. Now, having said that, that $37 million bond issue assumed, I believe, a 5-year payback. And so the first year payment was about $9 million. So what would happen with a much larger issue is, number one, we would not raise it. I should start by saying it would not be our intent to raise the tax rate. The same chart that was referred to, that the $37 million issue anticipated a really short time frame to pay back, about 5 years. So what we would, even with that, it shows a declining tax rate in our debt fund rather significantly. It goes from about 29 cents, and it shows by 2026, I believe, or 2023 even, that it's down to about 9 cents. Now, there's nothing bad about the tax rate going down, so long as you don't have needs. Well, we have needs, and so what would happen is we would and we will look to our financial advisor and begin to estimate, based on a size of a bond issue, the repayment schedule. And likely what will happen is, one, the schedule will likely be longer for a bond issue that size. Typically in the last 20 years, when we sold 30, 40, 50, or even 100 and some million dollars worth of bonds, when we did the high school, for example, and Creekside Middle School and so forth, those bond issues are typically about 20 years. And so it's a little bit like your mortgage, except our mortgage doesn't go for 30 years, but it's more typical that they'd go for about 20. So between the length of the issue and the possibility that we would essentially not allow the rate to drop as much as it's projected to drop now, the combination of the two, we will have no trouble keeping the tax rate level or declining, but I do not anticipate that it will go up, certainly will not go up as a result of these projects.
My another question is about the overcapacity at the elementary level. So currently we have over 800 empty seats at elementary. And if you build a newer, bigger Carmel Elementary and a new Clay Center and a new one at Clay Center, and based on the projected enrollment by the 2016 study, we will have over 1,700 empty seats. I want to see how you address this overcapacity. Are you planning to we can spread out students through redistricting so we will have a better student teacher ratio, or you see the potential of closing, eventually have to close another school to address the overcapacity?
Thank you. One of the things that happened was that from the time we started the meetings, when I first met with the school board and then later with the public, my thinking changed. And I was criticized for that. But the fact is if I could have predetermined whatever it is I thought we should do, and then had several public meetings and already knowing the outcome, and then it wouldn't have changed. But I was affected by public comment, and I took that into consideration. And one of the significant changes was that when I started with the board, I very much had the needs of Orchard Park and Carmel Elementary, which is why they came into the picture to begin with, because it was time to talk about doing something with those schools. And so it wasn't a matter, by the way, of targeting those schools for anything negative. It was they're the ones up for renovations, and so Carmel Elementary in particular. But I also had tied to that how many schools. And so, Lynn, what you're referring to is our current demographic study has us declining by 2026 by about 800, almost 900 kids perhaps. And so I had that in my mind, and we have capacity for about 7,800 kids, and I'm proposing to increase that by a couple hundred at Carmel Elementary School. So that seems inconsistent. The problem is so first, I later decided that those two issues could and should be separated, and that I would recommend building a school at Clay Center Road, essentially regardless of what the future enrollment should be, because I think just in terms of the geographic location of the schools, that if the enrollment drops, we still have a disproportionate number. We would continue to have a disproportionate number of schools on the east side of town versus the west side of town. At some point, before we get to how many schools, we could either find it necessary to redistrict to balance the enrollment. Even if all the schools were under capacity, we would not want to have 4 or 5 schools at capacity and then have other schools with 300 kids in them, because again, it goes back to the programming is what's really important. And when the school gets too small, it has a negative impact on our ability to program for kids, and that is the center of our attention. So at that point, I came to the conclusion that we should address Orchard Park and Carmel Elementary, and we're not going to forget about the enrollment and so forth, but I don't believe that decision needs to be made today or even probably in the next several years. We will update our demographic study, and I'm sure over time we've always updated our demographic study. And so there was a lot of comment, for example, some of which would be hopeful, I think, to perhaps save a school or whatever, that the downtown area is developing, and millennials, they're more interested in that walkable community than having their home in the suburbs or whatever, and that may be true. Time will tell, and none of us can predict the future. But one of the significant changes for me was that I felt that it was appropriate to separate those two issues.
And so with regard to the enrollment and going forward, I don't want to dwell on this too much because whatever the projections are, they'll change either plus or minus. But I believe what will happen in the future is we will continue to make good decisions on facilities, as I'm proud to say that I think we've made good decisions in this school community for the last 25 years, and I think we'll continue to make good decisions. And so if going forward, at some point, I would believe that we would have excess capacity and capacity that we didn't need. And part of my presentations in the past was sharing information on how much it costs to operate a school and so forth. But we will, those decisions will be made if it comes to that. And so, but we will have other buildings that will be kind of the Orchard Park and the Carmel Elementary of those days. That is, there will be other buildings. You know, they all have life cycles, and there will be other buildings that there will be conversation about. It's time to renovate this building. Well, do you need it? Is it in the right location? What's it cost to renovate? All those questions, and I'm fully confident that good decisions will be made in that regard. But whatever they are, I don't believe that what we're talking about here, that we'll look back and say we shouldn't have done this. Because whatever that enrollment is, I don't anticipate that, I anticipate that we will continue to need a more balanced location for our schools.
Thank you.
I've got a couple questions real quick. You just touched on the demographic study. So am I understanding you correctly that you would do one this fall?
Yep.
And regardless of what we decide as a board on this particular decision, we will do one this fall. And then if we should move forward with this recommendation, we're still going to do one in a few years, like 3 years or 2 years?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily determine now when we would do one beyond this fall. But historically, and you know, it's changed because when we were growing 500 kids a year, we needed to really stay up on top of that. We're not doing that now, and so I don't know the exact timing. I would still recommend that we would have a study done this fall for a number of reasons. One, it's relatively speaking, you know, it's not that expensive. The last one we had updated was, I think, about $7,000, so it's, you have to minimize it. But I think this whole discussion raised a lot of questions. Are we going to grow? You know, there's different development, and many of you sent me all kinds of information, some of which I already had, but as far as, you know, housing starts and different planning and so forth. So I think it would be worth it for the community to have that update. Right now, our enrollment is up at the elementary level. It's up beyond what we would have anticipated. So, and as we staff for next fall, just here in the last month, you know, the enrollment's higher than what we would have anticipated. Last year, we gained about 50 students more than what we thought. Now, that's 50 in the context of 16,000 kids, but every student counts, and we'd rather see it go up than down. And so we really do want to see, you know, where we're at this fall. Not because it would change a decision as much as just give us that update, and it may give us a little insight about, you know, what has changed in the last couple of years. From a demographer standpoint, generally, even if they are wrong, they don't usually say they're wrong. What they'll say is that things changed, you know. And you really can't fault the demographer if property is rezoned or you know, different conditions to where you can go up now and build to where, you know, several years ago you couldn't. There was a time in this community where a long time where there really wasn't very much multiple housing, apartments, condos. Now it seems like that's all I'm seeing built. So, and I know that's not true, but I mean, the point is it's changed, and that can change the demographics. And so I think it would be worth it to get that update, not because of its so much immediate value, but given this conversation, for one, it would provide maybe some more current insight as compared to what we have now.
Yes. Do we have any idea of where the kindergarten enrollment is at this point?
Amy can speak to that, I think.
We're on track. I believe we're around 900 students. Typically, we have about 1,000 to 1,100 students. And so this time would be typical of where we're at.
Okay. And I've also noticed that our enrollment for this year was higher than the demographer said it was going to be. And so I find that interesting, which means that the enrollment could continue to stay up instead of decline at this point, especially since our kindergarten enrollment seems to be pretty high. And the other question is, when is the best time to take enrollment numbers? Because I know our enrollment at the beginning of the year is different than what their enrollment, what the student number is later on in the year.
Yes. Anytime I'm speaking to enrollment, I'm talking about the official enrollment for the school district, and that's about the middle of September. Every school district in Indiana has to take account of their students. They call it the ADM, 8 days membership. And so that's the one count that really matters, because it to the extent that's the count that drives the funding. So for each one of those students, we get about $6,000. So every one of them matters, and I would much rather take additional students and deal with that, even if it's when it was 500 and we were building a lot of schools. It's a lot bit easier. I'd much rather deal with that problem than the opposite if we're declining. And so we hope that the enrollment does stay up or even increase. That would be a good thing. I was at West Clay this morning, and the principal noted that they had 777 kids. And so I don't remember offhand. I believe the enrollment in September was about 20 students less than that. So what happens is we have that official count in the middle of September, shortly after, a month after school starts, and then it starts to change. People move in, they move out. In a community like this, we're used to more moving in than move out. And so by the end of the year, we have more students than what we started with, which also explains for some of you why your class size gets beyond what you would like, what anybody would like to see it. But at the elementary level in particular, well, really every place, it's just not. It's not, even if we had the money, it's not practical to change teachers in in February or something. But that's the normal routine. And as I said earlier, our overall enrollment would seem to be a little higher at this point than what we would have anticipated. Now, again, over the summer, we'll have movement going on. There'll be people moving in and people moving out. So, which is why kind of have to wait and see who shows up. But if anything, I think we're more optimistic that we'll be beyond the demographer's projection as compared to less than, which again we would much prefer it that way.
Yes, having driven out River Road lately, the building out there is going crazy. Do we happen to know how many students we are accumulating from that?
Somebody around here knows. I don't know. Our transportation staff certainly knows, but I don't know just off the top of my head. But you're right, that whole development on roughly River Road and 146th Street, they're doing a lot of construction out there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I got an email today. We read your emails. I promise you that we do. And for every email that you send us, we send about 3 to Roger, and we ask him questions. And the parent asks this question: "Can you help us? Can you, different things? Oh, I just thought of this." So as much as you see us not maybe doing so many questions up here, there are lots of questions that we are being asked, and the task that we have in the next few weeks is not an easy one. That we know that when we talk about seats and numbers, that there's a face behind that seat and that number, and we don't take that lightly. And all of us are parents, and all of us have children who have been or are in school, and so we know how important those schools are to you. So I just really fast just wanted to say that, my heart, I understand as much as I try to, is, that it's hard, and we understand that. So I don't want to get emotional, so I'm going to go into my next part. So in an email I got today, a parent said please do the greatest collective good with the least amount of harm. And I took that very seriously. And I know that we all do, that we want to make the best decision that's right for our families. So just as a public service announcement, please know that we are working hard and we do want to make that decision. So that's all.
Well, I'm just going to quickly piggyback on what you had to share. We feel very fortunate that we have had such an outpouring of public comment. That is what we had been seeking all along. Roger came to us in April. There was some conversation before, but came to us in April with ideas, with thoughts that he wanted us to really explore, and he had an outline of how he was going to share this with the community, so we would have an opportunity to receive information and receive ideas and input, so we as a board can make a very thoughtful, appropriate decision which is in the best interest of our students. And we do not take that lightly. And we really appreciate Roger and Amy going out and soliciting feedback. We do not mind. We've responded to dozens and dozens and dozens of emails, and if I've not responded to you yet, you will be getting a response. They are just on my tickler list because I have a lot that we are getting to. So we have read each and every one and appreciate the feedback. We truly do. And I know others have questions, and I usually summarize, and if there's any question that I have at the end that hasn't been touched upon by my fellow colleagues, I will ask those. So I will open the floor to additional questions. Katie or Mike? I know you might have had some.
Most of mine have been covered because, like I said, I've emailed Roger and I was like, I'm going to ask this question and I have this question, and so thank you. I will have more. I will have lots more. So that's not I'm not done yet.
I'm going on vacation.
Again, I appreciate the sentiment that was just conveyed by Katie and Layla, and of course that is how we approach everything here. And I think from my perspective as a starting point is all Carmel Clay students deserve to have the same quality programming and facilities, and those are important to all, and that's why we do this long-range planning. That's why we look at a building and its useful life. And that'll, I guess, segue into my first question, which I know you've covered before, and I know you cover at the meetings, but just to restate that the source for building a building is different than the source for lowering classroom size by having more teachers.
That's correct. Currently, Indiana school funding is what's called fund accounting, and we sometimes describe it as money is in like silos. So there's a fund currently there's a general fund, which is, as the name implies, is for general operating expenses. That's where most of the teachers and staff are paid for. We have a transportation fund, which only transportation expenses come from, a bus replacement fund, a debt service fund that repays debt. So all these are categorical funds. You cannot commingle the money, which is why over the years any number of school districts have responded to questions about how can you afford to build that new high school or build that new building, but you can't lower my students' class size. And that's one of the reasons is because it's different money, and so you can kind of be building rich and operationally poor. And in Indiana, that's often the case, it seems like, and you've heard a lot about school funding or the lack of it. So there's been some questions in this process about does anything we're talking about here, I'm not in favor of it if it raises class sizes or lowers class size. And this whole conversation really has no impact of that, except when we're talking about a small school, it does. Because what happens in a small school is if you have 58 kids in a second grade, and if you have, or 60, you're either going to have 3 teachers, which is 20 to 1, which is our average is about 24, and you know how averages are. We could have one at 20 and one at 30, and so it's averaging about 25 or so. But in a small school, and thus small grade level, you tend to, unless you just get lucky because you can't control how the kids show up, but if 60 kids show up, you're either going to have 3 teachers with 20 kids in a class or you're going to have 2 teachers with 30. And so we know which one we'd rather have, but the money is driven by the students, not the size of the school or how the kids show up in terms of what grade level they show up and so forth. So which is why we feel that 750 capacity
in most of our schools at any given time, they're not going to be at that capacity. If they were, that somebody's going to be overcrowded most of the time. But a school that size gives us the flexibility. It's large enough that that we make full use of the spatials teachers like art, music, and PE, media specialist, principal, assistant principal, nurse, and so forth, because we have that same staff at Carmel Elementary with 500 and some students as we do with West Clay with 777. And so, because it's not practical to think we're going to hire, a bunch of part-time spatials teachers and part-time nurses and so forth. Some of those you could, but we don't really have any part-time principals that I know of, or assistant principals. So in that sense, it makes a difference in terms of size. But other than that, this whole conversation really doesn't, we're not going to do something that raises class size overall or lowers class size overall. And so it doesn't really affect that. Now, having said all that, the funding's changing in 2019, where we're going to have two funds, and I won't go into all that, but we'll basically have an operational fund, and then we'll have an educational fund. And as the names imply, this will be operational, this will be educational. And within that operational fund, some of these other funds like debt service or transportation and capital projects, they won't be separate funds, but from an accounting standpoint, they'll be accounted for within that one big fund. And so you still have operational money versus educational money. And so, and you really still can't mix the two.
And the source for buildings is bonds and property tax as opposed to what we get from the state per pupil.
That's correct. Simplistically stated, the operational fund, which is oftentimes when people talk about our budget and so forth, they're really talking about our general fund or operational fund. That all comes now from state funds, sales tax and income tax. All the other funds, transportation, facilities, repaying debt, all of that comes from primarily property tax. We get some excise tax, but the major source is local property tax. And that's the tax rate that the school board has some opportunity to control. And I say some because we're fortunate to have a very high assessed value, which it results in a lower tax rate as compared to other districts that don't have as much assessed value. To raise the same amount of money, they have to have a much higher tax rate. So all of that becomes very important.
I have, I guess, really two requests, but not for tonight because I know I'm throwing them at you at last minute. The first one is I'd like to be able to see some sort of map, and I know we've talked about a heat map, and you wouldn't be able to see each student on top of that, but more a map that would show by neighborhood, or by major streets that there's this amount and this. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves that redistricting will, be decided down the road. But I just think that would help me visualize how many students are on each side of center. And obviously that will change over time. And then my second request not for this evening is, I know we've talked about the fact that this is a 3-year timeline, and depending when we as a board make a decision, that could extend it to a 4-year timeline, because the end goal, if we decide to build a new school, is that it's ready, before school opens, and we're not going to build a new school and open it in January or some other point in the year. So I guess what I'm looking for is, if the board, and I know we've got some room because I know some of the planning is, we'll start talking to architects, we'll start talking to things to develop those things, but the idea that would be, if you don't decide by X, we won't be able to have a new building by 2021-22, but we'd be to 22-23 school year. So,
on your last comment, what I would suggest the board consider is that it's several months before we really start spending, very much money. In other words, one of the first things we'll do is we'll need to hire professionals. Then we'll need to have those professionals work with our professional staff and they'll work through a process we call developing the educational specs, which is defining, what you want in this building from a programmatic standpoint. And so that takes a while, can take a few months. And so it's not until when the architects start drawing a building that's when you begin to start spending, more meaningful amounts of money at that point. And then but it's not until you award the bids. When you award bids, now you're really, now you're committing, you're entering into multi-million-dollar contracts. So that's the big decision. But there's some, significant ones before that. But the first few months, there's not. And so in this project, for example, I think we could go quite a ways in terms of, unless the board feels that, we just don't need a school period anywhere. But if we do, then we could progress to kind of stay on that 3-year schedule without. I mean, you've got a number of decisions along the way that you have to vote on before you go to the next step, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so, and it, can be 3 years, it can be 4 years, it could be 5 or 6 years. But the condition of the buildings doesn't change, and the circumstances don't change. So unless there's something we're waiting for, then the question is, if there is, then we should wait for whatever it is.
And so I guess, again, I know this is a question for down the road. So in the past, we've used, designed a school and then built the same floor plan in multiple places. So part of this process, I'm assuming, will be our needs for, if we follow your recommendation, should those schools be the same? Do we have the need for an emotional developmental program at one of those schools? Do we have a need for EduCare at one of those schools? And so that, that would be part of what you're saying takes, whatever it be, the first 6 months, the first 8 months.
Yeah, those kind of, what I would anticipate, certainly it's very appealing to use the same set of floor plans. We have four of our 11 schools, 2 of them, Cherry Tree and Smoky Row, were built off the same floor plan. And then 4 schools were built off of the same floor plan as Prairie Trace. Prairie Trace, Town Meadow, West Clay, College Wood. So that's 6. And you can't tell it now, but Mohawk Trails and Woodbrook were on the same floor plan. They totally look different now, but they're originally the same floor plan. And so one of the reasons we do that is, one, we like the design at that point in time, and so we spent a lot of time and effort in designing. And so if this was a good design, why would you do another design other than, I mean, our buildings are, their first requirement is to provide the functional needs to carry on an educational program. We're not building like a monument or something, and so we want them to look nice and so forth. But we would wonder why we would need 2 different designs if we're building the same, or building 2 buildings at the same time or even close together, which is why we've done what we've done in the past. And then secondly, there's a cost incentive for that because you're not paying for design twice. And so when we're talking about the kind of money we're talking about, that's several $1,000s, and so there's a number of financial incentives associated with it. Having said that, then, just like some of the buildings or some of the programs that you mentioned, if we said, well, one of these 2 schools, because Orchard Park, for example, is one of 4 schools that has early childhood, and so if we said, well, we still need a location for early childhood, then that would you'd still likely use the same floor plan, but you either would have an addition or just add those 2. It's 2 classrooms, so you'd add those 2 classrooms into that basic design. Is most likely what you would do. In the same way with our EduCare, relatively speaking, those are not large programs from a space standpoint, and so that type of differences in the 2 buildings would just be accommodated. And in the 4 schools, the most recent 4 schools, they're not all identical. One is but when we went to the second one, we said, well, we'd really like to have the cafeteria a little bigger or something, so we moved in the office area a little bit different. So they're not identical, but they're basically off the same floor plan.
Well, I do have one other question for you. You had mentioned, and it had not really crossed my mind, at Carmel Elementary, the baseball field's in back?
Yes.
if we are going to, in your proposal, build there so classes can continue to happen and then everybody would just move to the new building, where would these, we're sitting on 35 acres. Would we be doing something with those 35 acres? What are your thoughts with all of that acreage?
Well, my initial thought would be if that materialized at Carmel Elementary, then I would look to consider replacing those 4 baseball fields at Clay Center Road. There's certainly plenty of property there, and doing that as a part of a large, construction project. Obviously fields, the first part is grading, and so when you have contractors out there grading for the school, for them to go over and, level out an area for the baseball, not to minimize it, but to level that out, it's really cost efficient to do that. We had a similar situation in about 1995 when the school district owned 80 acres of property on Spring Mill Road, and that's where the soccer fields are at. And so we sold that property, and we then bought 160 acres at Shelburne Road, which now you know what's at Shelburne Road, and including what looks like a dad's club complex on the east side of that property, but that's actually 40 acres of school property. And so when the school sold the property on Spring Mill, we built the basic fields, rebuilt the basic fields of soccer on that Shelburne Road property. And then since then, the Dad's Club has improved it, and they built a building out there and so forth. But the initial fields, the school, so this would be something very similar to that, I think.
Other questions? Okay. Well, we have your email address.
Yes.
And I know we'll continue to email and ask questions so we can make a very appropriate, thoughtful decision, because this is not easy for anyone. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And next on our agenda is you again. So, our financial update. Thank you, Roger.
Okay, briefly on the financial update, you can see through April our cash balance is declining. Last month we estimated it to be down at about $200,000, and so indeed that's about where it's at, $239,000. That's very expected because of the local referendum that we have. We receive those funds primarily twice a year. We'll start getting early draws next month, and so that will begin to turn that cash balance, and then by June, it'll come back up as we get the May tax draws from the referendum.
Well, that's good to know, because it looks kind of dismal.
It does. Unfortunately, we know why, so it'll be all right.
Okay. Are there questions for Roger at this time? Well, thank you, Roger. Next, we have superintendent's reports.
Okay, just wanted to share, we're winding down schools. The school year, we have 7 student days, and we have lots of different activities going on at our schools, as well as finals going on at our high school. So it has been an exciting year, and we're almost finished with that.
Mm-hmm. Quick question on the finals. I know this will be the 3rd year with this final schedule. Is that going quite well, I'm assuming, or?
Yes. Well, when I was, Roger and I had the opportunity this year to have our student advisory group, and then also last week at the radio station when they were talking about that, and the students that we have talked to said that it is very much well received, because they have the opportunity to balance their time. They can stay up late if they're a nighttime study, or they can get up early if they don't have a final until 10 o'clock, and then they can go in later. And so it is very well received from our students. They can go and get that one-on-one help during the office hour times with their teachers. So,
thank you. Well, I guess we turn it over to board member reports. And I don't know if there's much to share on the legislative front, but Mike, we turn to you.
There is no legislative report this month.
Okay. And next, we turn to you once again for the superintendent search update.
Thank you. Well, for those of you that are left, I don't have any, I'm not going to give a big announcement here, but I will tell you that the process is moving along. We are very close to hopefully be making an announcement of who our superintendent will be, and to meet our goal of having that person in place hopefully before July 1st, but no later than July 1st, so stay tuned.
Thanks, Mike. Katie, we turn to you for parks.
ESC is closing down. They're planning their end of year celebrations at each of their sites. The Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation Department does hold summer camps all year, and they do utilize 3 of our middle schools for that. So they have them at the Monon Center and Founders Park and a couple other park areas, but then they also do it at each of the middle schools.
So not the elementaries?
No, there's no summer school, not summer school. There's no summer camps in elementary schools, only at the middle schools. And that's all.
Thank you. Well, while we don't have any, it's open report time. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Need to report on the attendance at NSBA, but I haven't put that together yet, so I will do that.
Well, we have had a lot on our plate, and that is okay. So maybe over the course of the summer, we will just have that unfold. Yes, that would be fantastic. Well, with that being said, we thank everybody for their attendance, their continuous feedback, and engagement. We wish you all a very, very wonderful, safe summers with your families, since the school year is coming to a very quick end, which scares me because there's a lot to get done. So thank you very much, and meeting adjourned.